Hello, welcome to Wine and Words Wednesday. My name is Mary Bear Shannon. I'm a reference librarian at the Haverford Township Free Library. I am here on my back deck enjoying, I don't have wine today, I actually just had beer, so this is Beer and Words Wednesday, where it's a weekly program where we share writings, either poetry or short stories or nonfiction or speeches, along with kind of winding down from the day. So again, my name is Mary Bear Shannon. I am a reference librarian at the Haverford Township Free Library, and this is Wine and Words Wednesday. So August is the month of this August is the month of recognizing the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which gave not all women, but women in general concept the right to vote. Not all women got the right to vote in 1920, but it was a good step in the right direction. There were women of color that took much longer to get the right to vote, but the 19th Amendment was passed in August 19th, 1920. Tennessee was the 36th and final state to ratify the 19th Amendment that gave women the right to vote. So I thought I would do some readings from some of the women who worked for suffrage and just to commemorate this really momentous anniversary, the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment. So I thought I would start with reading the document that really started everything, which was the Declaration of Sentiments. 1848. In fact, today is the anniversary of the signing, the crafting and signing of the Declaration of Sentiments, which happened in Seneca Falls, New York. So let me get started with that. Again, this is from 1848, the Declaration of Sentiments. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one person of the family of man to assume among the people of the earth a position different from which they have hitherto occupied, but one to which the laws of nature and the nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes that impel them to such a course. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of those who suffer from it to refuse allegiance to it and to insist upon the institution of a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as they shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of women under this government, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to demand the equal station to which they are entitled. The history of mankind is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations on the part of man toward woman, having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over her. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has never permitted her to exercise her inalienable right to the elective franchise. He has compelled her to submit to laws in the formation of which she has had no voice. He has withheld from her rights which are given to most ignorant and degraded men, both natives and foreigners. Having deprived her of this first right of a citizen, the elective franchise, thereby leaving her without representation in the halls of legislation, he has oppressed her on all sides. He has made her, if married, the eye of the law, civilly dead. He has taken from her the right in property, even to the wages she earns. He has made her morally an irresponsible being, as she can commit many crimes with impunity, provided they be done in the presence of her husband. In the covenant of marriage, she is compelled to promise obedience to her husband, he becoming to all intents and purposes her master, the law giving him power to deprive her of her liberty and to administer chastisement. He has also framed the laws of divorce, as to what shall be proper causes of divorce in case of separation, to whom the guardianship of the children shall be given, as to be wholly regardless of the happiness of women, the law in all cases going upon the false supposition of the supremacy of man, and giving all power into his hands. After depriving her of all rights as a married woman, if single and the owner of property, he has taxed her to support a government which recognizes her only when her property can be made profitable to it. He has monopolized nearly all the profitable employments, and from those she is permitted to follow, she receives but a scanty remuneration. He closes against her all the avenues to wealth and distinction which he considers most honorable to himself. As a teacher of theology, medicine, or law, she is not known. He has denied her the facilities of obtaining a thorough education, all colleges being closed against her. He allows her in church as well as state, but a subordinate position, claiming apostolic authority for her exclusion from the ministry, and with some exceptions from any public participation in the affairs of the church. He has created a false public sentiment by giving to the world a different code of morals for men and women, by which moral delinquencies, which include women from society, are not only tolerated, but deemed of little account in man. He has usurped the prerogative of Jehovah himself, claiming it as his right to assign for her a sphere of action, when that belongs to her conscience and her God. He has endeavored in every way that he could destroy her confidence in her own powers, to lessen her self-respect, and to make her willing to lead a dependent and abject life. Now, in the view of this entire disenfranchisement of one half the people of this country, their social and religious degradation, in view of the unjust laws above mentioned, and because women do feel themselves aggrieved, oppressed, and fraudulently deprived of their most sacred rights, we insist that they have immediate admission to all the rights and privileges which belong to them as citizens of these United States. In entering upon this great work before us, we anticipate no small amount of misconception, misrepresentation, and ridicule, but we shall use every instrumentality in our power to effect our object. We shall employ agents, circulate tracts, petition the state and national legislatures, and endeavor to enlist the pulpit and the press on our behalf. We hope this convention will be followed by a series of conventions embracing every part of the country. Firmly relying on the final triumph of the right and the true, we do this day affix our signatures to this declaration. And this was signed by many people, but some of the more famous people who signed the Declaration of Sentiments was Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, and Frederick Douglass. Again, the Declaration of Sentiments was written and signed in 1848. So the next thing I'd like to read is a narrative of a speech given by Sojourner Truth. In 1851, it was given at the Women's Right Convention at Old Stone Church in Akron, Ohio. This is Sojourner Truth. Well, children, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women of the North, all talking about rights, the white men will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all that here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any place, at me any best place. Ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. Ain't I a woman? I could work as much as and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the leash as well. Ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off into slavery, and when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. Ain't I a woman? They talk about this thing in the head. What's it they call it? Well, it is, honey. What's that got to do with women's rights or Negroes' rights? It is my cup. If my cup won't hold a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? Then that little man in black there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And now they're asking to do it. The men better let them. Obliged to you for hearing me, and now old Sojourner ain't got nothing more to say. And again, that was from Ain't I a Woman speech. It was given in 1851 by Sojourner Truth. And then a speech from Susan B. Anthony. This was in 1873. This speech was delivered after Anthony was arrested, tried, and fined $100 for voting in the 1872 presidential election. Friends and fellow citizens, I stand before you tonight under indictment for the alleged crime of having voted at the last presidential election without having a lawful right to vote. It shall be my work this evening to prove to you that in thus voting, I not only committed no crime, but instead I simply exercised my citizens' rights, guaranteed to me and all United States citizens by the National Constitution, beyond the power of any state to deny. The preamble of the federal Constitution says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. It was we the people, not we the white male citizens, nor yet we the male citizens, but we the whole people who formed the Union. And we formed it, not to give the blessings of liberty, but to secure them, not to the half of ourselves, not to the half of ourselves and the half of our posterity, but to the whole people, women as well as men. And it is a downright mockery to talk to women of their enjoyment of the blessings of liberty, while they are denied the use of the only means of securing them provided by this democratic Republican government, the ballot. For any state to make sex a qualification that must ever result in the disenfranchisement of one entire half of the people is to pass a bill of attainder, or an ex post facto law, and is therefore a violation of the supreme law of the land. By it, the blessings of liberty are forever withheld from women and their female posterity. To them, this government has no just powers derived from the consent to be governed. To them, this government is not a democracy. It is not a republic. It is an odious aristocracy, a hateful oligarchy of sex, the most hateful aristocracy ever established on the face of the globe, an oligarchy of wealth, where the right govern the poor, an oligarchy of learning where the educated govern the ignorant, or even an oligarchy of race where the Saxon rules the African, might be endured. But this oligarchy of sex, which makes father, brothers, husbands, sons, the oligarchs over their mothers and sisters, the wife and daughters of every household, which ordains all men sovereigns, all women subjects, carries dissension, discord, and rebellion into every home of the nation. Webster, Worcester, and Bouvier all define a citizen to be a person in the United States entitled to vote and hold office. The only question left to be settled now is, are women persons? And I hardly believe any of our opponents would have the hardihood to say they are not. Being persons, then, women are citizens, and no state has the right to make any law, to enforce any old law that shall abridge their privileges or immunities. Hence, every discrimination against women in the Constitution and the laws of several states is today null and void, precisely as in every one against Negroes. And that was Susan B. Anthony in 1873. That was after she was arrested and sentenced and fined $100 for actually voting in the 1872 election. Now we move up just a little bit closer to the ratification of the 19th Amendment. This is an excerpt from Carrie Chapman Catt. It was a speech she gave in Clarksburg, West Virginia on August 3rd in 1916. This is just a short excerpt of her speech. Now, in the view of these facts, it is not clear that women are possessed of some great disqualification. Now, what is this disqualification? It is not a question of intelligence. There are a great many women of this land who have a great deal more intelligence than a great many men. Our government says to us, men, intelligent and ignorant, you may vote. Women, you may not vote. Why not say, intelligence you may vote, ignorance you cannot vote? That would be justice. Are women good enough? Search the records of your county jails, courts, and police records, and you will find that it is men who keep up these institutions. Search the records from your churches and your Sunday schools, and you will find that it is the women who are keeping them going. The public schools of our country, the hope of a nation like ours, and you will find that this is the women who are keeping them going. Where would a nation be? Where would its citizens be if it were not for the women? It is the women who are keeping them going. We have given the women our country freedom. Even in Russia before the war, they were struggling to get what they called the four great liberties. They were free speech, free thought, free press, and free organization. Women have brains, or schools would not be provided for them, and women may go upon a platform and talk just like a man, but she may go out in West Virginia and get an idea, and she may say, here is something West Virginia needs that it has not got. She may beg for the law and talk that law into the statutes of the state. Did you ever stop to think that a woman has just as much privilege in some ways as a man, that she is just as free as a man 364 days out of the year, and the 365th day she has the same freedom, only she is only allowed to operate 16 feet from the only place where freedom is worthwhile. What danger is there to our country? But a woman will desert the home, and that is the reason. We heard in Parksburg that the place for women is at home. Many years ago, I traveled through the country in the interest of suffrage and stopped off in the towns, but I didn't talk about it in those days. People said the same thing then. in every town I visited, and I thought it extremely strange how they had all learned the same thing, as men didn't travel very much from one town to another then, and I wondered how they came to their conclusion. One of them said, "No, if we give the women the vote, they will stand on the street corner, smoke big black cigars, just like the men on election day." I didn't know how they got the idea. Syllogism, when they think this like a horse or a dog. Now, this is the way it worked. I had seen them doing the same thing, but therefore, if women vote, they will stand on the street corners on election day and smoke big black cigars and talk scandal. Now, I have observed ever since that when people don't think they will give you something of that kind, you can't think of your mother without thinking of her at home. Perhaps she was. Perhaps she was getting you a cookie out of the hidden jar, or perhaps she was giving you a spanking, or perhaps teaching you your prayers, and you can't think of her anywhere else. And because men go away from home to vote means that it will take women out of the home. Therefore, women can't vote. In New York, they kept saying this until they got on my nerves. They repressed every nationality and religion under the sun, and some of these men did not know what women's suffrage was, but all they said was, "Woman's place is at home." And that was Carrie Chapman Catt speaking in 1916. So that's what I have for you today. Those are some of the pioneers of suffrage. Again, suffrage was passed for women in August of 1920. Of course, there were a long road after that for women of color, for Native American women. They did not actually get the franchise in 1920, but it was a good step in the right direction, and we do celebrate its anniversary today in August of 2020. So again, thank you for joining me for Wine and Words Wednesday, and I hope you have a great day.